All right, Arvin, we are back for part two in this little series. So in part one, we talked about what the crucial roles of hiring are for your Amazon business, who you need on your team. This
Mm-hmm.
is our second part. So if you haven't seen that first one, check our channel out. Go back and you can find that video. This second video is about the pros and cons of kind of the different ways to hire those roles. So essentially, when we're talking about operations, PPC, maybe graphic design, you have a couple options. And normally there's at first you're doing it all yourself. You know, we start Amazon businesses normally by as a solo man, woman, whomever, and then we graduate to maybe, or maybe we have a co-founder, but then we graduate to needing some help. um, the options that we have are obviously there's a multitude of them, but it's really going to
Mm-hmm.
distill down to after do it yourself is always an option, but then it's freelancers, uh bringing someone on in-house, so actually part of your team. And I guess the third one would be external agencies. We've taken part in kind of all of these methods. You and I have both worked for Amazon agencies. We both worked with a ton of freelancers. We both worked as freelancers. We both worked in-house for brands. So we've really seen kind of every different direction that this can go. But I think that let's kind of dive into it, starting maybe with, I'd say, doing it yourself and then kind of versus bringing someone on in-house. So any
Mm-hmm.
kind of comments or anything that you can kind of you've seen over the years?
Well, I think pros for having someone in-house is, of course, they will be should be dedicated to your products, to your brand. Um, I mean, before we're talking about pros, I mean, one of the cons would be like training them, telling them what to do, because usually both in-house and freelancers, they will wait for you to tell them what to do sometimes, not unless you hire someone that's really good. And then managing their time, expecting that they will be coming in on time that you're expecting them, though sometimes they aren't. So that's some issues that I am seeing when you have someone in-house.
Yeah.
When it comes to yeah,
To
to
add to
pros,
that,
of course.
to add to
Yeah.
that real quick, I think in-house you're generally going to have more cost because it's expensive to have someone, and either you're going to have them either on a part-time or full-time basis. But normally, I feel like the costs are higher. You can generally you're either going to pay for someone who's really experienced and they're going to cost more, or you're going to hire someone who's less experienced, but that means you're spending more of your time training that person, which is valuable. There's pros and cons to both sides of those.
Are you
However,
saying by experience?
based on experience. Yeah. You
All
and with
right.
really with all of these, I would say there's a level of management. You know, you kind of even with an agency, I'd say agencies are kind of the ones that you maybe have should, if you pick a good agency, have less management needs. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
also a sliding spectrum of how much you need to be training, how proactive you are versus they are. And I'd say that that's kind of the big challenge. Building an in-house team though is like a superpower, because like
Yeah.
ultimately for time, even though you're putting in so much work up front to train people, but they really are baked into your brand. They're dedicated to your brand. Even if they're part-time, you know, they're likely only going to be have time to work on maybe one other brand out there. If they're full-time, you know they're dedicated to you versus a freelancer and an agency, their entire business models are built on how many brands can we support per person, right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
don't have the same level of dedication, I'd say, from for just your brand. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, yeah, I believe so too. Yeah, so the challenge also from the or having someone in-house is that usually if they don't know the answer, they have a tendency of asking you. So yeah, and like, I mean, comparing it to an agency or a freelancer, they're usually an expert in this field, so you don't have to worry about them knowing what you're asking them to do. They already know how to do it. It's if not, then why hire them, right? So the
Right.
in-house will be just, I don't know how to do this, how to find this, how to solve this. That's usually how I see it. But then once they get better at it, it's just part of growing a team, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of the pain. But if they are already an expert in it by you having them manage or training them, then they will be a really good asset.
And also with in-house people, it's more of a fixed expense or fixed cost than it is with freelancers or agencies. I mean, normally
Yeah.
like freelancers will often be month to month kind of things or project based. Agencies are normally going to do 3, 6 month, 12-month agreements or contract lengths. So, but even with that being said, you can normally say, hey, we want to end our relationship. and it's a little, you have more flexibility there in terms of cutting a cost or an expense, which depending on the type of person you are as a business owner can be a very valuable thing. So that's in-house. Let's talk about freelancers for a minute. What's your experience with freelancers in terms of pros and cons?
Well, I mean, I haven't worked with a lot of freelancers, but usually, if I need one, I need to make sure that they are really good with whatever they're doing. They have profiles that I can review in some sites where I can find them. So, I think the uh the cons, as you said, is they don't have that much time to be dedicated to you because they're working on a lot of projects. So yeah,
Yeah,
so you don't know the quality at times, but then if they are good, if they are really the expert in that area, then that's a different
yeah.
scenario, right? So yeah.
I would say I'd say after, I personally have talked to probably now about 500 or 600 Amazon brands of all different sizes, and I've personally worked with maybe, I don't know, 50 of them at least, maybe more than that, probably more than that, but intimately with 50. I'd say to me, the big things with freelancers, they're normally going to be significantly cheaper than the other two options of, in-house or agency. The downsides, and normally they're much more like flexible in terms of month to month or project based, so very short timelines. I'd say the
Mm-hmm.
big downsides are collective kind of knowledge. So if they're an individual shop or they're working only maybe with one or two other people, they might be really good at one or two or three or four things. But what happens when they run into that one thing they don't know? Like, oh, I got this really tricky listing takedown there, and then they start telling you they don't know how to do it. Right now, you have to
Mm-hmm.
go get another person to come help. The other big one I hear literally every single week is communication. You don't always have clear communication or transparency. It's definitely something, if you are going down that road, you really want to filter with for, because that's the biggest thing I hear brands tell me is, oh yeah, we hired a freelancer and they were very inexpensive. They did some good work, but we just never knew what they were doing, or we didn't know or we had to ask, or it was always reactive, or they sent me a bill, but I don't really know if they did all that work. And that's one of the big things that I see.
Yeah, just wondering why you will pay them if you don't know what they are doing.
Well, you don't always know until you start working with them, right? And that's
Yeah,
part
that
of
is
it is,
true.
and I mean, same with all of these. Like, there's a certain level that you get. Of course, people have their pitches, and having track records always the best thing to look at. But at the same time, just like with everything, like, you don't really know until you build that working relationship. And so, I mean, what
Yeah,
is that saying of hire slow, fire fast? And I think it's like, take your time, try to find a really good person to bring on or team to bring on, and then if they're not performing, you kind of give them a chance, coach them, give them a second chance, make sure they have a true understanding and resources. And then it's like, okay, you've done everything. All right, it might be time to move on. And that just means more headache for you. And I think the other thing is, like, what happens if they get sick? A freelancer is normally a small operation, so no redundancy versus, and same a little bit with in-house, but with an
yeah.
agency, they're gonna have baked in teams. So if your account manager is sick, guess what? There's gonna be someone else there to step in, generally speaking. So
Yeah, plus
yeah,
they know usually the ins and outs with when it comes to Amazon's processes. So you don't have to worry about these things or not knowing about the things that you're asking them to do because they will find out it for or they will figure it out for you.
yep.
So,
Okay, what about agencies? We've both worked as account managers for agencies. We've also both talked with probably, I mean, I've personally talked with about 100 or 200 Amazon agencies. So, I know quite a few of them out there, but what are pros and cons for agencies?
well, in some agencies, I'm not saying all, but in some there will be somewhat expensive, covering the month over month or the monthly payment. Um, so and then I think that's one of the cons that I can think of. I think of something else more later. But yeah, when it comes to the pros, they are really good. They know what they're doing. Yeah, as you said, there will be redundancy if one is out sick or just randomly not reported to work today, then someone else will cover. You can also just request at random times. You can ask them for a call if you have questions or ask for clarification, anything like that.
Accountability
Yeah,
too. Accountability
yeah,
and proactivity. Not all agencies are going to be proactive. Some are reactive. Normally pay a slight premium for a real true proactive agency that makes your job more hands off. but I would
Yeah.
say, there's a cost associated with all that. But agencies are like, if you're a serious player, to me, it's you're using an agency or it's building your in-house team or you're trying to do both at the same time. That's kind of how I look at it. I see freelancers more personally as like the stepping stone from being you and or co-founder to like maybe you don't have the affordability yet to either get an in-house person or an agency, so you maybe bring on some freelancers, and then the next tier is agency or in-house team member.
Yes. But then again, yeah, everything that we're saying right now, we're not generalizing it to all the in-house freelancers or agencies. Maybe things that we're saying is actually the opposite in some sellers based on their experiences, right? But yeah, so I agree with you. Like as you said there, sometimes they will start with the freelancer just to start getting more profit to cover the cost, and then eventually look for a more experienced agency, and then after that, they whenever they have their the capacity to pay someone in house, then they can bring in more people in house. Because one of the limitation also with the agency, there are some limitations with what they should be doing, because they are engaging into a contract, and in that contract it says like what they will be doing for you, and if
Yeah,
it's beyond that, it's either you will pay them more or they'll say that, oh, we can cover this one, unless they're
yeah.
generous enough to help you.
So make sure
But
you're very
agencies do
clear in
business
terms
as
of
well.
the scope and the expectations when you're looking for agencies or talking to kind of an agency solution.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that was a really good breakdown. I'm sure there's other questions, and of course, like Arvin pointed out, obviously this is a very generalized version of this. The best thing you can do as a business is sit down for an hour over a weekend and write down what your needs are, what your affordability is in terms of like how much can you afford, and that will help. And then what are the things you want to outsource first, either that you hate doing or the things that will have the most impact, ideally for the lower cost or lower effort, or just like PPC is high effort, but it's going to be very high impact. So try to assess those. We've done matrices internally. Arvin loves matrices, so try to assess that stuff. And I would just say spending an hour or two on a weekend can really, I mean, it's like it's such a like useful amount of time to really set the stage for what you need for your next maybe 6 months or a year for this next growth cycle. So if anyone does have questions, let us know in the comments down below. Our next video is going to be talking about where you can actually start hiring for some of these various roles. So freelancers, for agencies, maybe for in-house individuals. So that's what we're going to talk and dive a little bit deeper on in the next video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel again to see that. But if you do have questions, let us know in the comments below. Arvin, any parting words?
Nope, that's it. See you on the next video.
All right.